Welcome back everyone to Remembering Borderlands, where today we'll be taking a look at what is widely considered to be the best expansion ever released in the Borderlands franchise, known as the Claptastic Voyage DLC for Borderlands, the pre-sequel, released in March of 2015. The release of Claptastic Voyage would sadly come just under a month before 2K Australia would be shut down due to reports of high operating costs. But before we get into the video, let's talk about today's sponsor, Raid: Shadow Legends. I'm sure Raid Shadow Legends doesn't need any special introduction. Everybody knows what this game is because it's one of the biggest mobile games available, and you can download it today on mobile for free. In Raid, you can go ahead and get yourself over 700 unique champions to use in battle with different strategies at their disposal, and one thing's for sure, it's that Raid is always full of surprises with frequent updates every few months to the game which add new champions, events and more. There's a PvP arena, it's available on PC, and the Call of the Arbiter event, which is a limited series which allows you to learn more about the characters and their background. There's going to be new characters from the series, including Artak, who is a mighty orc warlord. And the fantastic news is that you can get it for absolutely free simply by logging into Raid for 7 days between now and July 24th. So definitely go ahead and grab that because you do not want to miss out. With all of this incredible stuff coming to Raid, if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Jump in today and use my link or scan the QR code on screen right now to get a free, absolutely free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. All you've got to do to get involved is click the link in the description, get past the tutorial, and then you can meet me on the battlefields in Raid Shadow Legends. Every single tutorial you complete helps me out in my battle, and then I can help you out in yours. Thank you again to Raid for sponsoring today's video, and I hope to see you guys in the fight. The main plot for Claptastic Voyage takes place right where the base game had left off. Handsome Jack is now truly filling his shoes with greed and insanity, and he calls upon his crew of dangerous villains to go inside of a Claptrap unit and receive something called the H-Source. And while not everyone is thrilled about it, they reluctantly agree. And with that, we begin our descent into the mind of Claptrap, a character who for some is loved and hated for others. Now, don't quote me on this, but I do also believe that this was one of the last pieces of content where we would ever get to hear the old voice actor for Claptrap, Mr. David Eddings, before he would abandon working with the company due to various disgruntlements. From the moment we enter Claptrap's mind, we get a full shot of what is, in my eyes, the best part of this DLC aside from the glitch rarity, which we will of course talk about soon. I mean, just take a look at how nice this DLC looks. Regardless of what you feel in regards to this DLC or any other DLCs in the franchise, there's hardly any disagreeing that it looks incredible. It felt like the environmental artists really let the ink flow here, getting creative with their work. I believe that a lot of this can be attributed to making a DLC inside the mind of an insane robot. You don't really have many rules to follow, and it's clear that in Claptastic Voyage, they understood the assignment perfectly. But lest we move on. After the admin decides to shred the pass needed to obtain the H-Source for Jack, we're set off on a long convoluted adventure in true video game fashion, where of course, being a Borderlands game, chaos unfolds. But before we can explore new areas and fight new bosses, we must first be introduced to the crown jewels of this DLC. It's of course, glitch rarity. This has to be one of the most creative and innovative systems I have ever seen in a Borderlands game. The concept, while a little complex, is pretty easy to understand. Glitch rarity can roll on basically any item in the game barring most uniques, and feature an error code system which alter the gun in special ways. There are 4 letters on the item card of each gun and a number next to each of them. The number symbolizes the rough chance of the effect happening, and as for the letters, these are the glitches they correspond to. The yellow loop glitch is essentially an infinite ammo mechanic on your weapon, giving you high fire rate and again a chance to not consume ammo. This would later lead to the iconic infinite loop glitch. The red overload glitch turns the item into a railgun, consuming more ammo per shot as a trade-off for massive damage and knockback. The green multi-shot glitch turns almost any weapon into a multi-pellet shotgun, and any shotgun
into a multi-pelleter shotgun. And finally, the blue Amplify shot, as the name would suggest, morphs the gun into an amp shot weapon, consuming shield for more damage. My friends, I am not exaggerating when I tell you that from the day this rarity was implemented, Borderlands fans instantly placed it on a pedestal as one of the coolest rarities ever added. I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I don't disagree with it and didn't disagree with it one bit. This rarity alone put pre-sequel up a notch in quality, something which would be very valuable to the game, as it had previously seen mixed responses from the player base on launch. However, let's continue with the story of this DLC. It is revealed that the piece needed in Jack's quest is located in Memory Bank Pandora, and this is where Claptastic Voyage goes from an okay DLC to a certified banger. Upon arriving in the cluster, it's revealed that the memory cluster is almost like a pocket dimension, sending the player back to prior locations from Claptrap's past. Pandora's Firestone is the first one, which is symbolic when you remember that we were first introduced to Claptrap back here during Borderlands 1. This Firestone has been condensed and features stuff like the very iconic Red Hotel and Zed's building. Once again, talking about the environment design, it is abundantly clear from looking at this place that the designers popped off with this DLC. I've always said how I feel that Borderlands is simply a timeless game, with its art style being unable to feel dated due to just how unique it looks. While of course you can always make improvements with the engine, games like Call of Duty can and always will show a clear quality change over time, but by simply looking at this gameplay, it's hard to not be impressed by just how visually pleasing the Borderlands games are. They hold up very, very well. But I digress. The goal in Pandora is to obtain bridge pieces scattered around the memory in order to retrieve the H-source. During this, many unique settings are visited, but none of them are as breathtaking as the revisiting of the Vault of the Destroyer from Borderlands 1. Not only is this set piece extremely nostalgic, but additionally, it's a huge lore showcase. During the main story of the pre-sequel, we learn that after the events of Borderlands 1, Handsome Jack would go in and retrieve the Destroyer's Eye in order to use it for the Eye of Helios. But it wasn't until now that we'd get a visual of this exact scene unfolding. After some brief interference by Tacitor, Jack instructs the Vault Hunters to destroy his hologram at once and retrieve the H-source. Unfortunately, the Vault Hunters listen, and the plan backfires. The H-source is sent into the quarantine zone back in the Nexus from the start of the DLC, and as such we must go back and get our hands on it, but this is also where we are introduced to one of the best, most manipulative villains we had seen since Jack himself. Of course I'm talking about Shadowtrap.
There's no way in or out of here.
While it's abundantly clear from the start that this robot isn't here to help us, it's able to manipulate Claptrap and the rest of the crew into helping it escape. To do this, we're sent to another memory bank, this time in the form of Overlook from Borderlands 2. And much like with Pandora, this memory bank is very similar to the original, having key locations featured. But sadly, this is where the DLC starts to take a very sad, lonely path. It begins to become very apparent that Claptrap isn't remembered by the people of Overlook as a good robot at all. Rather, during the memory reconstruction, it's shown that due to his limited brain function, Claptrap ends up getting numerous innocent people killed through rather simple mistakes, like getting the wrong fireworks, or accidentally knocking over a medical cart. This is where the narrative is pushed that Claptrap, while he might have good intentions, does nothing but cause harm to those around him, parallels which are awfully similar to that of Handsome Jack. But this matters little to Shadowtrap, who continues to narrate the scene in hopes of his rescue. Once the quarantine override key is obtained, the hunters return to the quarantine zone, where Shadowtrap is unfortunately set free.
I am Shadowtrap. You know not what you have done. Come, take the shiny.
This is where it's revealed that the gang has just made a grave mistake, but more specifically, Claptrap has. After Shadowtrap takes off, we're told to follow behind. And I loved this part of the DLC in particular because in this moment, if you weren't already invested, the devs do something very smart which will undoubtedly pull a reaction out of most people who encounter it.
Yeah, that's not a good sign. Hold on, let me work some magic. Wow, system really crashed. Maybe you're not supposed to be in there.
Man, when I saw this for the first time, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't have money for a new console, and my first thoughts were that my Xbox had just died. I was very, very worried. With this, the story being told is that Shadowtrap is a very, very powerful entity inside of Claptrap's mind. Our attempts to catch him only fall flat, and just when you think you have caught him, things only get worse.
Rescue my hope and self-esteem, which are both being held prisoner nearby somewhere super scary. With them, I can go anywhere I want. Don't find them, I'll mark the first place you need to go on your echo.
Oh man, just humor them.
After retrieving Claptrap's hope and self-esteem, another double cross is pulled, where once again, it's shown that in this story, Shadowtrap is the one who reigns supreme, as a sick, twisted plot twist is revealed to the player.
I've not been captured mere cycles into my life by those idiot insecurity protocols and placed in quarantine. Without me to control the Claptrap executable, his combat responses were bound to be chaotic. Analyzing, I'm the only friend he has here. He just doesn't know it yet. Now your pet Vault Hunter has given me Claptrap's hope and self-esteem. I can blast a path deeper into his mind.
This whole time, you were being tricked. The Claptrap who you had just helped was actually Shadowtrap, and now, you've made him more powerful than he ever was before. The chase continues, and once again, upon catching up with Shadowtrap, it would appear as though all is lost.
When I join with this unit's consciousness, and we splice ourselves with the H-Source, we will be a power this galaxy has rarely known. The H-Source contains more secrets than seem possible. With it, I can rule Hyperion. But then, why stop there? This cold drill is just one of its wonders. It will tear up through every layer of the OS. You wouldn't believe how much power surges from below. This is freedom!
The plan is simple. Rip open the code and take over Claptrap's mind forever. Shadowtrap doesn't just want power, he wants to be free, no longer locked inside of Claptrap's mind. Now protected by Claptrap's hope and self-esteem, a deadly fight ensues between the two, and Shadowtrap luckily falls to the Vault Hunter before any real damage can be done, and as such, Claptrap and the H-Source are saved. Or are they?
Thanks. Whew, I needed that back. Really had me on the ropes there. But you're still trusting your eyes, huh?
How many times must I tell you? I can project the forms of others. No matter. This unit's consciousness will thank me for not letting Jack get his hands on it.
You're not Jack! I'm still in Claptrap!
Thanks for returning the H-Source, idiot. Now I'll use it to kill you.
Shadowtrap once again pulls the rug from beneath the feet of our crew and shows yet again that he is simply just 2 steps ahead of us at all times. By this point in the DLC, it is abundantly clear that we're dealing with the most powerful villain we've ever seen next to Handsome Jack. If Shadowtrap gets out and is free upon the world, who knows what damage he could do. And now, it was time for him to attempt his escape. Begging Claptrap to let him take over, Shadowtrap vows to kill every person who has ever wronged him in his life. This is an offer which is used as a way to manipulate and gaslight Claptrap into giving up control. But luckily for once, Claptrap does the right thing and saves lives. This is a major turning point from earlier in Overlook, where it's shown that Claptrap truly wants to change and is tired of making mistakes only to be used as people's punching bag. It really is a touching moment. But sadly for Claptrap, this angers Shadowtrap, who then decides he will kill his way out. Armoring up in a suit of metal, Shadowtrap makes yet another attempt at killing the crew, but this attempt would once more prove to be unsuccessful. With desperation rising, we get faced with one of the craziest boss fights in Borderlands history, as Shadowtrap returns as the Hyperion Space Station, EOS. This is easily one of the most memorable moments from the entire DLC. As for the entirety of Borderlands 2, we looked up at this space station and watched it, as it would rain down fire frequently from Elpis. And in this DLC, we get to directly fight it finally. During the fight, Shadowtrap does everything it can to make the Vault Hunters and Claptrap feel bad for what they're doing, through echoes of Lilith, Tannis and Zed. However, ultimately, it would not be enough. And as EOS would fall, Shadowtrap would have the H-Source plucked from his lifeless body.
Where's my damn legendary?
Hey, you got the H-Source. Awesome. Get back to me at the lab.
Shadowtrap is finally defeated. Upon finally returning the H-Source to Jack, the missions would be completed, and sadly for Claptrap, this involved Jack's decision to end the life of every single Claptrap unit in existence. Yet another sad, evil plot twist in this DLC. While most robots are disabled electronically, Jack saves the worst, most painful punishment for last, as inside of his office, Claptrap is shot straight through the chest by Handsome Jack. But of course, with pre-sequel being a prequel to Borderlands 2, a post-credit scene reveals that in his last dying breath, Shadowtrap releases enough energy to revive Claptrap, who lies out in the cold snow of Windshear Waste from the opening of Borderlands 2. His rescue party would be none other than the ever-affectionate Sir Hammerlock, who saves Claptrap, keeping him going for years to come.
Got ourselves a bit of a fighter, eh?
And that about wraps up Chapter 6 of Remembering Borderlands. When I replayed this DLC for the video, I was truly shocked when I realized just how great this DLC still is. I mean, of course I knew this already, but I think over time, I just forgot how good it really was. One of the biggest parts which sunk in on me over time was the storytelling. I always thought that despite Claptastic Voyage being the best gameplay overall for any of the DLCs, Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep featured the better villain and writing overall. But when I played this again, I have to hard disagree with that. This expansion is without a doubt in my mind Gearbox's magnum opus of any expansion released in the Borderlands franchise. And I wasn't the only one who thought this. Fans would frequently ask Randy Pitchford for the rest of the pre-sequel expansions which got cancelled. However, sadly, Gearbox had already moved on to Borderlands 3, and as such, their hands were sadly tied. Claptastic Voyage, for all we knew, was the end of an era, and the closing of the book.